Welcome, guys, to the very first episode of the Alpha Pump Podcast. Now, the Alpha Pump Podcast, it is our goal to provide you with powers. And in this sense, we want to enhance your power for giving. My name is Zach.
I'm Sunny.
And we are superhuman. That's what we believe, at least. And we want you to believe this about yourself. Both of us grew up with comic books in our life, with spirituality. That was in the shadows, and we've been able to bring it forth with a lot of different ways, a lot of different self-discovery, and in some ways a lot of pain. And this is where we are today. And because of where we've gotten to today, we feel as if we have a lot of value to share to you. So today I want to tell you that this podcast is specifically for givers, people that want to give to others. And in reality, there's a lot of different mediums and a lot of different occupations in which can identify this, but we actually want to go into the soul of what it means to give.
Sounds excellent. I couldn't say it better myself. For the most part, I would say, at least starting off for me, that I'd like to think that this podcast is going to be for just about everybody. That said, nothing is for everybody truly. And I'm hoping that through giving our stories and being vulnerable with you guys, it'll give you or help you realize what I realized when working with Zach, which is that being vulnerable actually isn't what it seems. The word itself is a little disingenuous to the meaning. Being vulnerable with somebody actually brings you closer together, and there's power in it if you can do it correctly in an environment that is safe, and it will help you connect to other people and create a really, really good culture and family that I believe that we are actually starting to build through our company. It's probably one of the most exciting aspects of what we do is the people we have placed around us, for sure.
For sure. That's actually the foundation of our relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I think you're the first person that I opened up to about things that I didn't open up to anybody else for some reason.
Well, I'm just, it's because I got a nice butt.
I think that's the one place I have you beat, man.
No, that is definitely the one place you will always have me beat, for sure. I'm not white chocolate Beyonce status. That's all you, dog. That's all you know what I mean? I got low butt. I'm Kevin Hart.
So, just to give you guys a background, and I guess, we can start off with our story. I met Sunny in August of last year.
Yeah, August 14th. You met me 2 months before that.
We have an anniversary date, by the way.
We do, because I remember I have the photo. I had used to my old phone. I had the photo saved, and I always check the date. But we started. My very first photo check-in with you was August 14th of last year, and I talked to you probably 2 months before that. But that was the day that we started working together, because the conversation we had before that was just like, "Hey man, I'm thinking about training. What are your rates? The general whatever."
Yeah. I was wearing a Mavs Charity Classic shirt. My boy Justin Bohannon, that is his charity, Make a Vet Sweat. Sunny is a veteran.
Yep.
And that sparked a conversation, and then apparently my tattoos appealed to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in a way that is profoundly meaningful for me, because I was like, oh, comic books. I'm planning on getting a whole comic book sleeve myself. I just haven't done it yet because, money. And but I already have some of the tattoos designed and all that stuff, and I was trying to decide, because there were a bunch of different trainers at the gym, and I actually had negative experience with a few of them, and it was between him or Nemo, actually. Apparently I have good taste, because that's another coach that you work very closely with, but the tattoos are what sold me for all that jazz. And then we actually started having a conversation about comic books, and you're the only person I'd ever met that knew more about them than I did. So I was like, like a fat kid looking at a cake for the first time, just, aww. Look at it go.
So I think, Sunny was my client in the beginning. We definitely connected on a very heart-level connection.
Oh, yeah, the first day.
Yes.
I remember I was living with my sister at the time. She came home after my first day of training. She said, how was it? And I said, I have a new goal. I went to Zach with a specific goal. I'd always wanted a six-pack, and I'd been training for 2 years, and I hadn't been able to get one. And I just wanted to know what it looked like once in my life. And when I sat down with my sister, she was like, oh, hey, how did it go? It was your first day of training with an official trainer, yada, yada, yada. And I said, nope, I have a new goal. I don't even care about the six-pack anymore. That dude's going to be my best friend in the whole wide world. And she just laughed and she said, really? And I was like, bet. No, here we sit, not even a year later.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Well, I think that speaks to manifestation skills.
Oh, for
as
sure.
well.
Day one, I knew. I was like, this dude.
Yeah. No, and on my end, I was manifesting a certain time in my life of understanding spirituality and really understanding energy work and how you can attract people into your life based off the energy that you're giving off. And I was just now coming into understanding that. And the more I was shown that it was real through people like you coming into my life, the more I believed it, the more I believed I had a superpower, right? So this is how this starts to go and cycle. And as you learn something about yourself, or you actually learn something about the unseen world, and it becomes real to you, you start to realize that anything is possible.
Right. Oh, well, so all behavior in and of itself is eventually cyclical. It all feeds into itself, which is why when you get into a negative space, it's so hard to get out of, because it feeds itself. And because our brains are designed for survival and not for the modern day America type thing, that when you think in negative thoughts, which your brain is designed to keep you alive, that's it. That's all. It's its only purpose. It doesn't care about your greatness. It doesn't care about anything like that. It's how to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, and nowhere in between does it understand anything else. So what, like a 2 million year old object rocking around in there?
Yes.
So when you actually have negative thoughts, they actually create these pathways in your brains that are actually physically embedded in there. And that's why it feels so challenging to get yourself out of those tough spots, because it just feeds into itself over and over again. And you have to actively try to way to stop the communication and then move and shift where you're actually thinking in your brain. It's biological.
And shifting to having some sort of spirituality or some sort of belief of the unseen world in your life, I didn't have that prior. So a lot of people identify with their thoughts as being their soul, of who they are. I think this is something that organized religion does a terrible job of separating the two.
Just that's the only thing. That's a whole nother episode.
We will definitely have an episode on that. Stay tuned. But if there was one book that was most impactful for me during this time, was the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, "Be happy knowing your thoughts are not you." And this came to me during a very painful time of a divorce, of realizing and admitting who I was in my former self, some of the tendencies that I had, some of the things that had prevented me from showing who I really was, had created these walls. And actually, I remember my lowest low during my very painful experience was actually at your house.
I remember.
And coming over to your house, and I just smoked a whole bunch of weed. And during that time, it wasn't the best time to do that.
Nope.
Again, on a side note, not against it, but definitely against it if your mind is not in a good spot. Found myself spiraling with thoughts. I was in the middle of obsessive thoughts, and we were watching The Matrix. And the one saving grace was you were funny as shit when we were watching The Matrix. You were saying some shit that really, really was taking my mind off it. So that was one. I remember we got up, I went and sat at a table because I started having almost an anxiety attack. And you pulled me out of probably the lowest low that I've ever had of self-loathing, and I'm forever grateful to you for that.
Oh, yeah, you've done it to me. Done it for me a few times. It's hard too, man. That's the easiest way to tell if you connect with somebody is if they can pull you out of your own head.
Yeah.
You know, because it's really hard to do for specific people, because it's not just about the message. You have to be able to say it and communicate in a way that person can hear, and sometimes that's the hardest part.
And I think something that you've were afraid of prior was your blunt honesty. And in that situation, your blunt honesty was probably the thing that brought me out of where I was.
Well, you know? So yeah, I'm actually less afraid of it now, because I realize that there's a difference between being a dick and being honest. There's a vast ocean between those two, and a lot of people try to intertwine them. They're like, oh, I can be a dick and be honest, or I can lie and be cushiony. And I'm like, that's the lie that I used to tell myself, is like, this is why I behave in this way, and I use this gift this way.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, that's actually not true. You can be honest and direct, and I mean, if they want to take it, somebody wants to take it the wrong way, that's entirely up to them.
Yes.
But I can sit there and say what I need to say, and not hurt your feelings all in the same space. It's perfectly plausible to do that.
So inside of there, more nuggets of what we'll be talking about, how your brain rationalizes your experiences, how your brain even like thoughts and how they come about and how they're created, and even more so your internal mechanisms of actually attaching yourself to that thought or discrediting the thought. And these are things that, again, going on a very baseline of understanding that your thoughts are not you, then it gives you this personal power to be able to pick and choose how you want to go about your thinking and what you believe. So, if I were to dive in a little bit into my story, I've came from a past of middle-class white America. There was nothing wrong with my upbringing. Again, I would say this over and over again. I think the worst thing about my upbringing is that my parents weren't terribly affectionate, but that doesn't mean anything when it comes to the things that I've wrapped myself into. Getting into pornography at a very young age, picking up drugs or picking up marijuana in my 20s, and letting marijuana be a numbing mechanism to something that I didn't understand. And I actually have just now recently come into the understanding of why I numbed myself or why I disconnected for so long, because I've realized that I am a male empath. But I would say I think that everybody is an empath, they're just not aware of it.
Okay.
I think that, again, we talk about intuitive powers, that in the scale of intuitive powers, different people have different accelerated powers, but I think there's a baseline that every human being has, which is intuition, right? Okay. Inside of intuition, you choose whether you're going to participate or believe it and amplify it or ignore it. And I ignored something for me. I had anxiety when I was very young. I had anxiety at 5 years old. I was chewing my fingers to the numb. I was lying to my parents. Who knows why? I'm not even old enough at this point to understand myself and what I'm doing and my behavior patterns. And I think what happened was, not because I can remember, but because this feels true to me, is that I ended up getting into things that would take away from connection so that I wouldn't take on the anxiety, that I wouldn't take on other people's emotions that were terrible, that came inside of me, and then I started identifying with them.
Right.
So by smoking marijuana consistently, I ended up having to numb myself. And something with marijuana that's coming out recently with some studies as well is that when you are high and there's somebody across from you and they are displaying an emotion, and typically if the emotion is a sad emotion or upset, you're not able to actually empathize correctly with that person because you're high. There's a haze over you. You're a little bit like carefree. You don't really understand why it's so bothersome to them. And right. For me, that was something that really hurt my relationships. My past relationship with my ex-wife, my relationship prior to that, it was a part of a cycle that I needed to break. So after getting into marijuana, I got into some harder drugs, getting introduced into an industry there is a whole underlying unseen world of the industry that I participated in, and inside of that industry and the people that I chose to hang out with, there was a lot of hardcore drugs, getting into the party drugs, and I really started to lose myself. And you talk about numbing yourself. Once you're using a drug to control your emotions, whether you're happy, and then you'd be super sad, and then happy, and you're just not going to be yourself at all. So all of these things came to head for me in a very, very painful experience of a divorce. And inside of that divorce, I chose to, after your life-changing conversation for me, truly, I chose to not identify with anything that I ever was and start going on this path of personal power, of meditation, of journaling, of thought and impulse control. All of these things, again, are things that we'll be talking about in this podcast to be able to help you become a better giver. Sonny, what do you got, man? What would you like to share?
I would like to add a caveat before we catch over. I'm a huge advocate of drugs. To what he said, precisely the point. The difference between using a drug when it's appropriate and when it's not, because I firmly believe that there is no such thing as a bad thing. We like to classify and attach titles to things, good and evil, bad and whatever. And there is, in my experience, it's just not the case. It's how you use it, like all things. Water is great for you, unless you're trying to drink 3 gallons in an hour and your electrolytes lose balance and you literally die of water poisoning. Then it's not good for you anymore, even though it sustains life.
Yes.
All things in balance. So that said, if your initial reaction in a deep emotional state is to reach for a drug, stop. That's unhealthy. If you're already hanging out with your friends and you plan this in advance, and this was like a planned thing you were going to all do together or as a family or whatever it has to create an experience full of memories, I feel like that can bring you closer together. That's the caveat I'd like to add.
Yeah, I think, and another time between us, there was your sister's birthday, remember? And you're like, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to have fun.
And we all did.
And I was good until the day of, and I was like, I don't think this is going to be good for me.
And then you don't do it.
Yeah, and then we understood that. So again, that was a big step for me, because before I'd be like, let's go.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. Self-control.
No, exactly.
So for me, my childhood is not quite so vanilla. No, mine's my childhood is extraordinarily unorthodox. My mother had us with a gentleman named Anthony Racconelli. Through a lot of self-discovery, I realized that this man is probably one of the worst human beings that I actually have ever had the unfortunate circumstance of having to meet, much less actually being genetically a part of. I didn't really know him that well. He left when we were really young. He used to sum him up in a single story, he used to fight dogs to the death. All you need to know about him. Then my mom got remarried to a man named Ken Coleman, who adopted us. Wonderful man. He's had 6 children, 5 that aren't his. And that's a feat in and of itself, because most men are running away from their children at a rapid rate in this culture. Then in the middle of that, this is more towards 6th, 7th, 8th grade, that time frame, they got divorced. She came out that she said she didn't come out. She found herself as a lesbian, and she got into her first female relationship. And the cycle of her life was very, very interesting, because she went from an unhealthy male partner to a healthy male partner to an unhealthy female partner, and then more healthy as she went through. But she reverted back. She reverted when she swapped over to the wet side. We'll call it that. Parts of it were actually really cool. She'd be like, "Look at that girl, she's cute," and I'm like, "Wow, Mom, we got the same taste." Good for you. But so Tony was physically abusive, and Cara was emotionally abusive. This was probably the worst portion of my childhood, because my sister and I were really, really close all through our childhood. Shared trauma, shared suffering will really kind of bind you together. Cara used to pit us against each other. She'd put I'll never forget, we were actually talking about this yesterday, she put our report cards down next to each other, and I wasn't doing as well, and she just kind of compared it, little things like that over time kind of devolved that relationship. So
well, not only that, but it actually it makes you believe that you're not smart.
Right, that you're not, right? And and the difference wasn't intelligence for sure. It was effort.
Yes.
I put in 0 effort because I didn't understand school, because I think it's a way I still do. But I just thought it was a waste of my time. I was like, none of this, even at a young age, I was like, this is not practical in terms of what I see around me and people doing with their careers. Yeah. Right? But because I'm getting B's, and I was an honor student still, but I was getting B's in honor classes and she was getting A's. And somehow I'm dumb now.
Yeah. So
that eventually fell apart in a huge, huge way. We can go more into depth into the entirety of my story, because if I do in depth through the whole thing, it will take way too long. After that came Amy, and by the time Amy came along, Amy was a relatively nice individual. She was a bit of a neat freak, a little obsessive compulsive in that regard. And as a teenage boy, I was very clean. That's what notoriously teenage boys are. It's very well put together, very clean. They take care of their environment. So we got along great. At this point, this is when it started to come out that this is when I started to realize, not really, looking back at it in hindsight, this is my biggest problem with the culture looking at it from a male perspective, is that we teach, men are only allowed to be like 5 things. We're allowed to be happy, hungry, horny, and angry. And that's it. And if we express emotion, there's not even 5, 4.
Non-emotional, you do 5.
Right, non-emotional, right, that's it, you know what I'm saying? Or not nothing, right, just in a state of
stoic.
Because, right, just all the time, because if you're sad, if you're too happy, too energetic, too charismatic, too much of any one of those other things, you get made fun of by other men, by women. I can't tell you, I've had women tell me, be a man. You know what I mean?
I've had the same thing.
Right. What does that even?
Past relationship.
Sure. Like, what does that even mean? Like, and here, the worst part is if you say it to a woman, be a woman. What is that supposed to mean? You know what I mean? But because of anyway, that is what it is.
Yeah.
So
we can have a whole.
We have a whole other talk about that as well. So that was, and that's exactly how I did. So I was very angry from freshman year of high school all the way through till very recently. Actually, that was how I expressed all of my emotions, was just through anger, because when you don't have the tools to communicate through the complexity of your personality, through all the different facets of emotion, they're all going to get funneled into the easiest one that's able to use. And for men, I believe anger is a very easy attachment. It doesn't take much, and we're allowed.
It has a manly.
Right, we're allowed. Right,
yes.
and honestly, anger gets stuff done. There's a lot of force. There's a lot of emotionality behind it. So we mistake the strength of that power and that shift in that single moment. We mistake that as actual power when it's realistically just a change in the moment. It's not sustainable over a long period of time, because you'll die of hypertension or a million other problems.
Yeah.
So after that, I spent some time with my uncle up in Tennessee. I moved out on my own, did a terrible job, started hanging out with people I shouldn't hang out with, ended up getting myself in a really, really bad place. I was in I eventually got kicked out of the place where I was living, started living out of my car, that eventually caught on fire. So I watched my home burn down. I'll never forget that, because that was actually kind of funny, because I called my mom and I was like, because in that moment, she's in Texas, I'm in Tennessee. We had not talked for a minute at this point. Yeah. So she definitely answered, and she was like, what's going on? I'm like, my car's on fire. And she's like, well, do you have stuff in it? I'm like, yeah, my whole life's in the bag. And she's like, what are you doing calling me? Get it out of the car. Like, I'm like sitting there, it's like, oh, yeah, okay. Like, just goes to show that no matter how old you are or what's going on in your life, you always need your mom.
Did it ever explode like an action movie?
The engine did, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
you got it out before that happened.
Yeah, right. Well, not the whole car, but the whole front engine. Bah! Huge bang.
Dude.
Yeah, it was an engine fire. So, and then getting the stuff out of the back. My uncle came by, saw him. I got a ride back for part of the way. Ended up walking part of the way. At that point in time, I lived next to a tree near the YMCA that I would wake up and shower and stuff. And then I eventually got a phone call because my mom was paying for my phone at the time. And it was a buddy of mine. He was like, hey, man, are you living by a tree? I'm like, nah. Nah. He's like, I'm looking at you right now, bro. Are you living out of a tree? And I'm like, you got me. So a friend of mine, Daniel, he took me in, good guy, he's ex-military, and at this point in time, I had started the process to join the military, because I had to make a change in some way, shape, or form, obviously, because life wasn't going that great. So he let me stay with him 2 weeks, and then once I signed the papers, my mom was like, I'll take you back only if you can't go back. So as soon as I signed the papers, swore in, legally I'm bound to go. So she took me back, I shipped out of here, and then I joined the military for 6 years. And that was a miserable experience. That was really rough for a really, really long time, for a variety of reasons. I ended up getting myself really hurt throughout the process. I ended up recording my spine. I had a whole bunch of lower back problems. There were days where walking wasn't really a thing, wasn't gonna happen. Towards the end of all of that, when I went to go get out, I was in a place where I was extraordinarily overweight. I felt awful. I was super depressed. I knew I couldn't stay in the military. And I decided, well, look, if I can't not be in pain all the time, because I can at least do what I can to manage the pain. So I moved out to Washington, and I got a job at Boeing, making good money, doing all that stuff. I started working out again, started trying to, I tried keto, I tried a bunch of just different diet stuff. And then I woke up one day and I looked at my life and I realized that everybody that I worked with, all they did was complain about their life. And I said, is this really what you want for yourself? Came up with a resounding no, because I didn't even really like doing the work. I was just getting paid well to do it. So I packed everything up. I pretty much drained my savings, moved back home. And then there was probably about a year period before I met you that was just as rough. Yeah. Because I had no direction. I'd never not moved in a direction before. even if it was the wrong one. I'm cool with moving in a wrong direction because at least I'm moving, and then I learn, and then
going for.
Right, but you know, this was probably, in terms of a spiritual aspect, it was the hardest part because I was sitting there doing stuff, and my mom, wise words, she said, "Have you ever just tried not moving, sitting still in the moment?" And that never occurred to me, right? Because I'm like, you know, busybody, right?
At this point, your mother had gained a whole bunch of wisdom through her own experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, that's you should have her on here. That's a whole episode podcast of her journey is even more than mine. Because I was going through this as a child. She was doing this while also succeeding from a business aspect and raising 2 children while coming out of the closet in the South. Like, most depressed woman I've ever met. She's been in almost every single tax bracket. I looked it up from the IRS. The odds of moving 2 or 3 tax brackets is like 20%. She moved through like all of them, rocking 2 kids, being gay. Like so many hats you can wear onto that one.
She's a very impressive individual. This actually is her gratitude journal right here.
Yep.
Something that she authored, and it was a tool that helped me immensely through what I did. So,
yep.
A wonderful woman, Alexis Thompson.
Just look her up.
Yep.
But she's the one that taught me that that going from, I think the lowest vibration, you taught me this, is shame, right?
Yes.
So from an energy perspective, whenever you feel an emotion, you emit a certain energy. Like goes without saying, when somebody's happy and bouncy, and when they're angry, you can feel it. And gratitude is the only thing that will pull you out from the bottom almost all the way up to joy. I don't know that does it go all the way to awareness? I think it does. Or close to.
I guess that would be something that we could actually look up, because I'm not necessarily familiar, but I do know that it'll bring you from a negative space to a positive space, and it completely just changes your outlook on your life and how you're viewing the things that are happening to you, and in all different instances.
Well, I know that gratitude can take you from shame all the way to joy.
Yeah,
so that's,
at least.
And that's one of the. I mean, who doesn't want to be more joyful? I've never met somebody. You know, it's like, oh no, I'd rather be angrier. Oh, okay, to you. But yeah, so and then I ran into this dude at the gym, and you know, as the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, I think we together, you know, you caught me at a very odd time in my life. You
caught me at the tail end of a really, really trying to figure out who I was point in my life.
And we've kind of figured out who we are individually,
right,
together. So
yeah,
that's why I mean,
just bouncing ideas off each other.
Yeah, there's too much credence to why this relationship is
works well.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a good word for it.
Yeah, it works well.
I like elegant.
Elegant, yes. So you know, that's a little bit about Sunny, and Sunny has astounded me in his way of thinking and bringing new ideas, and even making me somewhat funnier.
You're always funny. You're more so focused on the stoic aspect of it all. Can't forget to love life a little there, my man.
Yeah, for sure. So this is the kind of stuff that you can expect on the Alpha Pump podcast. And when we say we want to enhance your power for giving, we both have come from different backgrounds. We both have had different challenges in our life that we feel is very relatable, things that you can take into your being so that you can, what I call, fill your cup. And you might have heard this metaphor before. You need to fill your cup, because if you are a giver, you're constantly emptying your cup. And the ways that you fill your cup are focusing on yourself. So, you know, I used to be a people pleaser, you know, and a people pleaser, you want everybody to like you. And if somebody doesn't like you, it drains you. You don't understand why they don't like you. And learning how to get rid of fear of judgment, and learning how to not give a shit what people think about you. And you have to learn this activity. This is an activity that you just automatically embody and become. Is a process in which takes time. And then also learning how to fill your cup spiritually, when it comes to meditation, when it comes to journaling, when it comes to physical fitness. You know, I started and still am a fitness trainer, and same thing with Sunny is now a coach. We work with people's bodies to give them a better positive body image, which then in turn enhances their mindset and makes them feel better with the confidence and the self-worth. But then the other side of things is really, you can do that, but that's for you. But again, when it comes to giving something else, you need to also have some sort of spiritual foundation that keeps your intentions aligned, that keeps your mind and your body aligned, and then also keeps your mind in gratitude. Being grateful for the things that are happening in your life is a huge thing. I mean, I think, you know, we are at I wouldn't call it a breaking point. It could be a breaking point for some.
Probably wouldn't know till that's a hindsight kind of thing.
Yes, but from my past experiences, when I would get into a situation of overwhelm, my natural tendency of my brain would be to revert, right? To revert back, or even to self-sabotage myself to revert back.
That was mine.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think we all have that. Some people don't identify, they think that, self-sabotage is a certain activity, when really it's multiple activities, it's just all self-sabotage. So understanding how to identify, if I were to explain from your confused...
Well, hold on, would you say, no, I'm not...
No,
would you say it's a set of activities or a mindset?
Well, I think it comes from your mind. Obviously, it comes from your mind's ability to want to be comfortable. But if, let's say, my old self-sabotage was drugs, right? Well, that's not prevalent in my life to an extent that that it inhibits who I want to be.
Right.
Now, things can come back into my being, like being on my phone for too long, or purposely focusing on so many things that I fail at them all. There's all these different things that I know about myself that I'm like, all right, and we had this conversation before this, like, we need to focus and give the appropriate amount of time. Going too quickly and skipping over things.
That is my Achilles heel.
Yeah. So we both.
Patience.
Yeah, I know it already. No, you don't. Right.
Take the time.
And then I don't know, whatever it is, a few days later, you realize how much back work you have to do because you missed an important detail and taking the time. So in that sense, these are all different forms of self-sabotage, right? But it is all self-sabotage, and some people get attached to, oh, this is what I do every time, right? And it's one certain thing. Well, you can get over that hump of changing that behavior, but then you got to realize that your brain still is active, and it's still in your body, and it's still going to try and do the same thing.
That pathway is still there, so it's easier to follow. Your brain wants to go into routine because it makes it easier to think.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't want to create new pathways. That's difficult to do. So you have to stay committed. That's why they say creating a new habit takes it's more than a day.
I think it says 30 days to create a new habit. I haven't seen, that could be one of those, I'm going to whisper in somebody's ear, and then after we whisper in 10, it was 60 and it was 30. Let's look up a research article one day and figure it out.
I personally believe that in that particular scenario, it's just like dieting. There is no one size fits all. Oh, it takes 30 days to, no. Some of the routines and habits that I have now, like I've always wanted to stretch. I've always wanted to be more flexible. Always. That has been something that's bothered me since I was a kid, and I had to do sit and reach, and I could barely touch the board, and people would make fun of me. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm a child, and I know that this is absurd. I just started instituting that habit after, trying and failing consistently 6 months ago. From the time I was 10 to the time I'm like, I'm about to be 28. Am I going to do me that long to institute this habit in a way that I not only feel comfortable doing it, but I enjoy it, right?
You realize that it brings you value. And
right, and actually it
and
feels good now. It used to hurt, right? It just used to just be painful, right? Same thing with just the way that some people, I presume look at lifting. Point being is, one, you can change whoever you are into whoever you choose to be. So just be careful with the words that you use. And two, and far more importantly, don't beat yourself up if you don't get there in the time frame with which you think you should be there, because your brain will lie to you more than anybody ever possibly could. And that was probably one of the hardest things for me to learn, because no one tells you this.
Yes.
No one tells you this, and you're like, oh, they're my thoughts, so they're me. And it's so easy to get, you were talking about that earlier, it's so easy to get wrapped up in those two. And that is 100,000,000% just not the case. So if it takes you 2 years to do something, it takes you 2 years to do something. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just keep doing it to the best of your ability. Eventually you'll get there, if it's important enough.
And two things that I attach myself to. One, stretching is a way of filling your cup, right? All different ways of whatever is going to increase your value, whatever is going to increase your mindset, your feel good. And then the other thing is when we were just going back to the 30-day thing, like when I was creating new habits for myself, I never put a limit on when, or a time standard on when they happen. I'm just going to do it in the moment every single day, and over time I now can sit back and completely separate myself and talk about my former self as if, yes, it was me, but I'm so far removed because of the habits that I put in place that it's easy to talk about without feeling the emotions attached to it of shame and guilt. And the difference between the two. Shame is I am a bad person. Guilt is I did a bad thing. And it's very hard to get out of shame for sure. And when you have those things combined together, if you're feeling that right now, this podcast would definitely help you get out of that space and understand what it takes to, what we say, earn self-love. Because people think that you can just love yourself, but in today's society of influence, in today's society of expectations that are put upon you by your teachers, by your parents, comparisons. Again, social media can be a wonderful outlet for positivity and putting out great content to help other people, and it can also be a tool of causing depression. Fear of missing out is real.
Well, and even to that, you can be putting out great content, and then somebody could be sitting there thinking, "Oh, I should be doing that." Right now, you feel bad about yourself all of a sudden.
Personally, for me, the reason why this is here. One of the reasons why this is here, not the underlying one, but one of the reasons is seeing a lot of people like Jay Shetty, like Lewis Howes, like Tom Bilyeu start bringing on very inspirational people to spread a positive message, and me saying, coming into my own self-belief that I could be that person. And then coming into that belief and organizing my own thoughts to actually put something out here like this comes from inspiration, but it also comes from a little bit of fear of missing out. Of like, oh, I can do that. I want to provide that. So
a little bit of fear. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of fear in there. Well, it's all things in balance, right? So people, we have lists of emotions and we say these are negative. We have a list of emotions and we say these are positive, and we decide which is which because we want to feel these and we don't want to feel these. And the the realistic scenario of life is you can't have one without the other. They exist in both space. So the first thing that when I'm trying to be better at myself is to not judge an emotion and how I feel.
Yeah.
That is just how I feel in that moment. And it will pass. And for me, it's more of trying to locate the reason or the source as to why, and understanding whether or not it's a valid source, or if it's something that I'm carrying from my mother or my sister or, Tim or Tom or whoever it might be, and being able to filter through my emotions correctly so I know what's truly mine, what's bothering me, so I can either change that aspect of me if I decide that I don't need it anymore, or if it's something that I would like to build on, doing that as well. That said, I'm hoping that the purpose that what the people get out of this podcast is a greater sense of balance and center.
Yeah. Yes. Because again, going back to if you're giving too much, you're not giving to yourself.
If you're giving too little, there's no sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, and the intention for sure, and then the intention of people that want to give, and then that they give too much. They start to actually view their giving as being a negative thing. They start feeling resentful. They start feeling angry. They get these low-level emotions and energies because they feel like they're not either getting in return, but they're not realizing, and this is what we want to help you guys realize, is that you can do the things for yourself to make that return happen. Not only a mindset, but again, also doing things like stretching, doing things like keeping fitness in your life. So things that we'll be talking about for sure. So I want to leave you guys with this quote, which I heard recently from Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it is ringing in my brain, and it's ringing in my brain this morning, and it's been in it for a while. And that quote is, you ready?
Yes.
Great opportunities are often disguised as impossible situations. And when you embody that belief, and if you're in your seat right now and you're watching this, and you're thinking that you have all these things happening and you're not leaning into the things that are bringing you fear, you're not leaning into the things that you say, that's impossible. On the other side of that is where fulfillment is. And so I really want you to think about that and bring that with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the very first episode of the Alpha Pump Podcast. If you would please just share and subscribe to the podcast, tell a friend. If there's anything that brought you value, you can comment or send us a message and let us know. And if there's any topics that you would like to hear us speak about and give our perspective on, we would love to provide that for you.
Stay super. Stay super.
Peace. All right. Alex, stay super. Alex, stay super.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about like when you had to sign off.
Stay super.
Stay super.
I'd already thought about it.
Was like I like Ron
Swanson.
Ron Burgundy sign offs. Oh man, I think that went really well.
Yeah. Mine's a little fucking flub up in the middle with my fucking words.
Ah shit. Man,
Yeah, no, it's so mild. I know.
Yeah, that's gonna.
Yeah, fucking nitpick.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, for sure.
How that fucking works.
First time.
Yeah, no. I came on here to fucking do something very specific for this because I had a thought. I don't really remember. Of course I don't. Because my brain is. I'm just impressed that I got through that and said all the things that I needed to say without fucking it up too much. My brain is just. that used all of the mental processing power that I had to fucking get through that shit. Oh man, yeah. As I was sitting there thinking about my life story, I was like, oh god, because there's certain aspects I want to go into more detail about. And I'm like, I'm not gonna have the opportunity to do that, or we're gonna be sitting here for a fucking minute.
Yeah, no.
My life has been lived, so.
I think you did a really good job of keeping it to the point of what affected you during that time.
Yeah.
And then again,
I tried to pick the big things out, not the details.
And then during that time, if you would like to, when we go further into this, we can take a specific time and then
to delve into it.
Yeah, and I think something that's always something that's impactful is taking the time to look at this specific time. Talk about the things that happened, talk about the new beliefs that came during, if you remember, what came from that and how you started to orient to the new world, and then coming all the way full circle to who you are now, how you discredited that through that time, because that's a lot of people that are going to be listening, they're going to be listening to a time in which they identify with that they're currently in, right. And they're going to be looking for the solutions of what exactly did you do to get to that point, so and that's why even in my story, like we talk about pornography addiction, we can get into drugs together, the misuse of drugs together.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And these are all things that
high tolerance. That's my superpower. Wait, what can you do? Copious amounts of drugs.